Hello, welcome to the Pod People. It's us. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I got 5 on it.
I am America. Or Cleveland Mosier, and yeah, nice to see y'all again. And
Well,
we're here, or
Do you got 5 on it?
yeah, I got 5 on it. Are you
All right.
kidding me? I always got 5 on it.
What if Ben Sheets, but red? Anyone?
Do you got 5 on it?
I do, of course. Everyone has 5 on it.
We all got 5 on it. That means we got a cool 15. Yeah, it's finally that time, the moment we've all been waiting for. We went and saw Us last night. We're just going to do some very broad stroke impressions first and then get heavily into spoilers. There's a lot going on here. This is obviously the sophomore film from Jordan Peele, who did Get Out and who is, I believe, producing and hosting the new Twilight Zone reboot that's coming out only on CBS All Access for some stupid fucking reason.
But what we can tell you is that this movie did not suffer from sophomore slump.
No, absolutely not. I think we can get that out of the way immediately.
Yeah, well,
I loved this film.
So the basic spoiler-free summary is Lupita Nyong'o, her character Adelaide, is at the beach, their beach house with her husband and 2 kids, and a family appears
Spookily.
and they have to deal with it, essentially.
A family of exact doppelgangers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Without spoiling too much right off the bat, I think this movie does a great job taking a lot of what seem like non sequiturs at the beginning of the movie, and as the movie goes along, really connecting them in interesting ways.
Yeah.
One of the first opening sequences of the movie, you get this long push into an old TV.
Oh, the Hands Across America.
Yeah, with the Hands Across America commercial. I was super confused when it first started, but as the movie goes along, it does a great job connecting stuff like that.
The same with like right after that with the when the credits where you're pulling back from Yeah, with that you're pulling back from like the wall of like rabbit cages and like this weird classroom looking space. That was very evocative, but like it took fucking forever for that.
It.
Like I was like,
is there
I kept thinking through the whole movie, like what was that? What was the room full of rabbits? And then that pays off very nicely at the end.
Yeah, but if you're thinking about seeing this movie, just go see it.
Yeah, pause this.
It's
and
worth
then come
it.
back and talk with us about it. You know,
Yeah.
It's
Twitter,
worth
you
it.
can join
Yeah.
the conversation.
When this is released, this movie should have been out for about a week. So if you haven't seen it already, definitely go see it. We're going to be getting really heavily into spoilers. It's a fantastic film. If you liked Get Out, you'll definitely like this. If you're a fan of high concept horror, you'll definitely like this. Go see it.
Oh yeah, because we're definitely we saw it last night. We got up bright and early for you guys to sit down, and we're just gonna unpack this whole thing.
It's the
there's
early,
a lot to unpack.
It's the early morning, boys.
It is.
It's about 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here in Durham, North Carolina.
Yeah.
We're all sipping on our hot cups of fresh black coffee.
Hot cup of joes.
Yeah, that's really good for just getting into some ASMR here. Just let it sit for a second. And we'll never do that again.
My name's Mark Maron, and I got that cup of coffee. Damn, that's a fucking good cup of coffee.
All right.
Mark Maron, so nice to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, what the fuck, Nicks? What the fuck, buddies?
Man, we've really ascended the ranks of podcasting, haven't we?
Yeah.
To get so lucky to have Mark Maron joining us on this show, talking about Us. Mark, what did you think of Us?
Well, you see, it reminded me of my guys back in the days. Like, I grew up with all those guys doing comedy. Like, Jordan Peele is a comedian, too. So
That's true.
I feel for him. I always thought about making fucking movies, and I never did it.
Well,
but I wanted to. Check out my show Marin on IFC. Like that's me making something.
Well, Mark,
I'm basically Jordan Peele.
It's not too late to start now.
Yeah, I'll call it Cocaine with Us.
Thanks, Mark. Great to have you.
All right. Are we throwing the spoiler warning on now? Do y'all want to slap it on there?
Down.
Okay. From this point on, heavy spoilers. You haven't seen the movie. You don't want it to be spoiled. Stop the episode right now. You've been warned.
And then come back after you've seen it, because we'd love to talk with you about it, because we got some stuff to talk about.
Okay, so I think that the best way to discuss this film as a whole is to just very quickly go through the narrative, and then we can break things down. Ben, do you want to just give basic breakdown of all the important plot points?
Yeah, we'll do quick broad strokes. So going off of what I said earlier, a family of doppelgangers appear, and it's revealed that they are sort of shadows of the family, and it turns into kind of almost strangers, funny games-esque situation. Home invasion situation. Family eventually escapes and goes over to their yuppie friends.
Tim Heidecker's.
Tim Heidecker and Elizabeth Moss, who both do a great job being
really
insufferable.
Yeah, they both rock out.
And it turns out they also have doppelgangers. And quickly it's revealed that it's a huge thing.
Literally sweeping the nation.
Yes.
It does this really interesting thing where it goes from being like a home invasion film to almost like
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like
strong vibes.
Yeah, sort of apocalyptic Invasion of the Body Snatchers style scenario.
Yeah, fucking awesome.
Which is cool. And those two subgenres, I think, are blended really well.
Oh yeah, like while we're on that point, I do really like that comparative of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, only because like Invasion of the Body Snatchers was, like so heavily playing off the zeitgeist of the Red Scare, that fear of the other across the sea. And this film does almost the same thing with that doppelganger concept of fear of the other, but it's internally reflected, and it's more about like the current zeitgeist with racism and classism being, so predominant. And I thought it hit. Yeah. It hit the fucking mark beautifully.
Another thing I want to double back to really quick that I think is important to the narrative is that the film starts with Adelaide as a little girl in 1986 at the Santa Cruz boardwalk with her parents. She wanders off and she goes into a like funhouse house of mirrors, and she sees a girl there who looks exactly like her. We don't see what happens, and she leaves, and she has been so traumatized by the experience that she will not speak. There's a group of really dope, cool kids sitting right behind us who really elevated this movie-going experience for me. Really loved it. How the dude right behind me laughed really hard when she ran into the mirror when she was trying to escape from the House of Mirrors and said, "She's dumb." That was a really good experience for me.
Yeah, really enhanced, also, the whole thing. Really created a great sense of ambiance and setting for the film.
Yeah, also I really loved it. I really loved it.
Fucking did.
Every time somebody was killed, the same guy would just go, "See ya." Like, that was really good. Like, man, if I hadn't been so intent like watching the credits, I would have like followed him out so I could ask if I could be his friend, because like I just want to surround myself with cool people like that.
Really, we should have, we fucked up. We should have asked him to come on the podcast. I think he could have provided really good commentary.
Yeah, I bet he had some really good thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Two quick things I wanted to bring up about the funhouse scene. One thing I really liked was the pitter patter of rain. He does a great thing with the weather where like as she's walking up to it, it starts raining, to like when she crosses the threshold, the rain really comes down behind her. Playing with rain like that can often be like very overbaked, but here it felt like nice and premonitory, and set the tone very nicely. But as she's walking around the inside, you can constantly hear the patter of rain on the roof, and it sounded really good. It was really really rich. But it plays in really nicely later on too. Whenever they cut back to that scene in flashbacks, you always are aware when it's a flashback because of like the patter of rain on the rooftop. And the second thing I want to bring up real quick was that when she first enters it as a child, I'm not sure if you guys noticed this, but it's a Vision Quest themed funhouse.
Yeah,
with like the Native American at the top of it.
It's all about find yourself, which I thought was fun.
Yeah, exactly. And because it starts up being like so and so's vision quest, find yourself. Yeah, and it has like this like like sage like Native American guy, and that in of itself is like indicative of like the 80s and like sort of like shamanizing Native Americans. And I thought that was a fun take that later on when they go back to it, it's Merlin's hut instead, and they changed it to like to play off like the
It's a wizard,
awareness
yeah.
had gotten a little bit better at that point. Like very cool, and it's still like it's Merlin's quest now, and it still has the
says
sign
find
saying
yourself,
find yourself,
yeah.
and the interior is the exact same. They just changed the name of
Yeah,
it.
it worked well with the themes of the movie, with
yeah.
the find yourself and whatnot, with doppelgangers.
And like even the building itself couldn't find itself. Like it changed its identity. Like very very good stuff.
One thing I want to mention about the audience before we get back into this is when we were exiting the movie, there's one guy at the front of the theater who's just like, I wonder what seeing this movie with your identical twin would have been like.
Yo, really crazy. Oh man.
Which I found fucking
Yeah,
hilarious.
We all giggled.
Like,
Like,
honestly, like, that's a joke I would have made, honestly, but he beat me to it.
There are so many just good, funny people in this screening.
But yeah, so we should get into it a little bit more. I think there's one part that I really want to unpack. Is there any plot stuff that you want to talk about before we just jump into themes? I think we covered it generally. I think if we want to go into details, we can probably do it when we're talking about details.
Yeah, that's okay. If you have something you want to get into, go for it.
So I really want to talk about, there's this one part where Red, Adelaide's doppelganger, which the doppelgangers, I guess, all have names, which we see in the credits, which I thought was a cool touch. But Red is asked, "Who are you?" In this interrogation sort of scene with the family. And she says,
we are America.
I think she says we're Americans.
Americans.
And I think that really plays into the core of the themes of the movie really well. I mean, the movie itself is called Us, but you can also see it as a bit of a double entendre with US.
Yeah,
you
sure.
know? It really goes into this idea of Americans not seeing...
Not wanting to look at themselves.
Not wanting to look at themselves, not wanting to look at the underbelly of their consumerism or their politics, you know, and how that really affects the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was reading an interview that Jordan Peele did with NPR this morning about the movie, and he was talking about like what he was going for with the title Us. He says he obviously came to the idea, you know, the doppelganger story is a story as old as time. And, you know, he always had this fascination with, like, if you were to see yourself on the street, you would have this sort of gut feeling that only one of you could exist and not both of you, and that if your doppelganger smiles at you, that means the doppelganger has the upper hand. And then he took that into the idea of everybody having a doppelganger. And us, he says, can mean like us as a family, us as a community, us as a group of friends, us as a country, or us as like humanity. But the important thing is not who the us refers to, but the fact that us implies that there must be a them. And if there's a them, that means that only one can exist. It's either us or it's them. That very much plays super heavily into the themes of this movie.
What's the line from Dark Side of the Moon? Like, us and them, and after all, we're only ordinary men.
But I think that also plays into the idea of like the US, because the US is like very much us or them. And not just like people outside of the US, but people inside of the US. And like liberals versus conservatives and all of that bullshit. It's all very much us or them.
Well, yeah.
You know?
I compared this movie to Funny Games in a way.
Yeah.
A film I've never seen. Could you?
Yeah, so Funny Games is an art house movie by Michelle Haneke, German movie. It's really kind of a meta film about a home invasion It's very nihilistic.
Cool.
The two guys go in and methodically kill a family, and it's all about the brutality and the ugliness of horror movies and kind of how nihilistic that can be sometimes. It's a very divisive movie in a lot of ways. He went on to make a shot-for-shot remake in English in America because he thought he made the original in the wrong language in a lot of ways because it is so connected to American horror in so many ways. The core of using kind of a home invasion to get at these larger ideas really hits home. And I think these movies are very similar in a lot of ways because, like Funny Games, this movie kind of gets at the idea of using horror as a tool for metaphor in a lot of ways, in talking about the brutality of American idea and the underbelly of what we're seeing. I thought it's a really cool connection. I think it's kind of fun that all of the doppelgangers are wearing red uniforms.
Very reminiscent of prison jumpsuits.
Well, and they all have the one like leather fingerless glove, and they all have like these big brass scissors or shears that they use as weapons.
Those fingerless gloves were like very specific. Are those from something? Are they like gardener's gloves? Like, what is their like original?
I was trying to figure
intent?
that out as well. I couldn't. I didn't get the significance of the one fingerless glove.
Because like the shears are
I'm
like
not
tailor's
sure.
shears.
Well,
those
and
are-
I mean, also the scissors make sense because the doppelgangers are called the tethered. They're tethered to their real versions. You know, they have to mimic their motions to a certain extent. So the scissors make sense. They're untethering themselves. They're cutting that bond.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I love the gloves. They felt very reminiscent of like Nightmare on Elm Street to me.
A little bit, yeah, minus the knife fingers.
Yeah, but
Oh, yeah, they are similar gloves, which makes me wonder if they aren't like gardener's gloves or something, because Freddy Krueger is like the school janitor, you know, and like I think that those
I think
are the
that's only
types of
in
gloves.
that's only in the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, isn't it? Or
Yeah.
Is that in the, I don't think in the original he's the gardener. I have no idea what the significance of the fingerless gloves are. If one of our listeners knows, hit us up. I guess we're just missing something.
Yeah.
I haven't looked too much into it. This movie just came out yesterday.
Yeah.
So I was just reading a couple of interviews with Jordan Peele this morning. I did think that it was interesting in that same NPR interview. He did specifically say that this movie is not about race, unlike Get Out, but that the idea of us versus them can be examined from a racial perspective.
Yes, and I absolutely loved that because.
But he
Get
wasn't.
Out-
He didn't set out trying to make this movie about as like an exploration of race relations.
Right, because like Get Out has such a clear allegory,
Yeah.
you know, for that. And I was very much so expecting that going into this film, especially considering like Jordan Peele, the cast, and the themes that you sort of get from all the hype surrounding the film. And I was thinking, okay, it's going to be another film, you know, of the same, hitting on the same sort of points of commentary. And I really appreciated how like this movie is so much more open-ended on that front. And it again, like why I appreciate it in the same way as like, you know, some of the old classics that play off of a zeitgeist, as opposed to just a film that's a direct commentary. And clearly he does both amazingly. And yeah, I really liked that this film was, it's a little bit easier to reflect on.
I wonder how
pontificate over.
audiences will receive the open-endedness kind of the ending, because you look at Get Out and all you have to do is look at the original ending where it's much more of a downer ending.
Yes.
Right.
You know, and think about how Jordan Peele decided to have more of a triumphant, upper, happy ending.
Right.
Where this movie is the opposite in a lot of ways. It definitely feels like a bit more open-ended. You know, I think that's the best word for it.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Well, here's what's really cool about that. I think that's a great point to bring up. We mentioned this in relation to Ministry of Fear an episode or two back, talking about how the film kind of needed to end on a happy note. Just not that happy of a note, like, but
Right.
we thought like it was necessary for the film to end on a positive beat because it was during World War II, and it's a World War II film, and you can't let the Nazis win
Right.
and or the good guys lose during the Blitz. Get Out operates in a similar way, like it's we're looking at like the height of like so many like of so much tension in the Black community. Like you can't have that film end on such a dour note. Like you have to have like it be a little more upbeat, and there'd be that little twist at the end where the cops that show up is just the friend in a cop car.
In the TSA vehicle, yeah.
Yeah, instead of it being the police, which in the original ending for Get Out, it's the police, and he gets arrested because of course he would.
Right, exactly.
And I love both endings of the movie for that, but you can see why they changed it, because at the time it was just like, the film is already about that's on everyone's minds. He
didn't want it to be so terribly bleak at the end.
Exactly, you have to toe a line.
Even though that bleakness is honestly the reality. It's the realistic thing that would happen.
I really enjoy the bleak ending.
I do too. I do too, but I think that as a whole, I prefer the more optimistic ending.
I think, when it was coming out,
if slightly.
I think it was almost needed. But in this film, because the themes aren't as direct, he could get away with his bleak ending. He could get away with his ambiguity, and I thought that was awesome. Like he got that ending. We got that Jordan, like that true Jordan Peele.
Maybe we should jump ahead a bit and talk about the ending, because I think this is the kind of narrative where we can jump around. I honestly did not find the ending particularly bleak. I guess we'll give a quick rundown. Adelaide follows Red back into the House of Mirrors and discovers a tunnel down into like this secret underground facility, where it appears that all the tethered were living, and we see through flashback that they are essentially human clones without the soul. They are destined to sort of half-heartedly mimic the actions of their counterparts above ground, and that Red was the sort of messiah figure who organized them into breaking out and trying to claim the above world for themselves. And they fight. We can get back into that later, because I think that scene is really great. Adelaide kills Red. They get in the car and they're all driving to escape or whatever. And we get a flashback showing that when she was a little girl, the doppelganger choked her out, essentially, dragged her into the underground facility, chained her to her bed, and switched places with her. So turns out Adelaide was the doppelganger all along, and that Red was the real Adelaide, and so that's why she led the revolution, because she grew up knowing the real world, so she wanted to, get them all out there. So
it wasn't a matter of Adelaide being traumatized after she, as a child, left the mirror place.
It was a different
the
person.
Other girl who was mute. Like who had never spoken, and so she had to learn to speak for the first time. And I love that, because like you can believe that Adelaide would have forgotten that they had switched out, because they were mirrors of each other, and they were tethered. So like you could see like this other spirit sort of relearning, and it's neat too, because it kind of implies that they do have souls,
and it makes She says that they share a soul. That's why only one of them can ultimately exist, is because it's a single soul shared between the two of them. And that also makes sense why Red is the only one of the tethered who speaks the entire movie, because she already knew how to speak, because she was the real girl. All of the other tethered just grunt and shriek because they've never been taught to speak.
Well, what I love about it too is when that reveal happens in the movie, it in a lot of ways happens to Adelaide at the same time. She's in the car and she is thinking about this and kind of discovers it in her own mind.
Right.
And you get this amazing sequence where her son is staring at her, looking kind of disturbed, and you don't know if it's just because of all of the events that had happened previously in the day and a half, or if it's because he has that realization.
I think he has the realization because he is, hiding in the locker when he sees her kill the doppelganger, and he sees her behave similarly to the way he's seen the doppelganger.
But I think he doesn't
ambiguity, and he's looking at her and wondering, like, is this the doppelganger or is this my mother? And it's cool because we're wondering the same thing, and the inevitable reveal.
Well, I think the nice thing is Jordan Peele doesn't overplay his hand there.
Yes.
Because there isn't any explanation. It is still very open. You know, he could have easily just been looking at her that way because fucked up shit happened throughout the rest of the sequence of events, which I really appreciate. But they do such a good job bringing it back to Adelaide. Those non sequiturs early on pay off in a great way. You know, like you were saying, the PTSD and her not talking was actually her not knowing how to talk.
Yeah.
On the beach, she mentions, I don't like small talk. I don't like, you know, talking to when she's hanging out with Elizabeth Moss. And what I noticed, which I thought was amazing, is there's a sequence where her daughter's doppelganger is killed on the car, right? Mm-hmm. Like she jumps on the car and is thrown off into the bushes. And Adelaide gets out of the car. And everyone in the theater obviously is yelling, "Don't get out of the car. Right. What are you doing?" And she goes up to the doppelganger and just stares at her as she slowly dies and cries a little bit. It was confusing to me at first, but then I realized, oh, well, that's in a lot of ways, that's her actual daughter.
Yeah, she would have been drawn out of the car like
that. You know,
that,
if Adelaide is the shadow, you know, this family is her actual family in a lot of ways.
Well, I don't know about that because she is the shadow, but she has been living in the real Adelaide's place this whole time. So her family is her family. Like her children are her actual children that she gave birth to. But she is from that place originally. She is, you know,
the movie does a great job talking about coincidences that happen nearby and unexplainables, and like even before it happens she mentions feeling like there's a black cloud over her.
Right.
So what I saw it as is almost mother's instincts in a lot of ways.
Sure.
You know, kind of unconscious feelings of that way. And you get a similar thing when the son's doppelganger dies. The son's doppelganger is, you know, slowly mimicking the son's behavior. So the son backs up and the doppelganger backs up into the fire.
Yeah.
And Adelaide is crying and saying no this whole time because I think unconsciously in a lot of ways she does have that connection.
Yeah. It's cool because like she has that connection for a couple of points. Like you make it clear you don't think this, but it's like, yeah, they're not like her true children, but because she is one of the shadow, like tethered was originally one of them. Like I think that there's that additional like binding aspect, and she does like see them as one of their own almost subconsciously. Yeah. And also they do literally look just like her children. So she's even more drawn to them from those points. So
I mean, and I think that is one of those things that is ambiguous in a good way, because when you're watching it before you know she's the doppelganger, you just think that she is behaving this way because they are literal doppelgangers of her children, so she is essentially watching her children die, so that's why she's emotional. But when it's revealed that she is actually one of the shadows, then
it recontextualizes
it really well. Because there is more to it, is because even though she doesn't realize it at the time, her subconscious knows that she is of the place that these people are.
Because you do see that like the shadow figures do have this like almost like psychic or like ESP like sort of link with each other.
Yeah, they
like
do.
When the mother in the house was like lifting her hand and like doing like all the silent commands, and they're so coordinated that clearly like they can kind of use their tethering with each other, I think. Or not clearly, but I think that's a cool implication. And so the mom, when she gets out of the car, already knows, maybe, there has like some sort of subconscious realization that she's not like in that much danger when she goes to like find the girl like dead. Out of context, on a first viewing of that scene, when she gets out of the car, it's like, oh my god, why are you having your main character just like clearly walk into danger? Like, that doesn't seem like a good writing choice. Like, what's going on here? And to have that really nice moment where she goes through the trees and she sees the dead or the dying girl. And and like from a personal level too, like it's so well done because like she's like trying to reach out for the girl and like give her some comfort like as she's dying with her back broken over this tree, and the girl like is just constantly like swiping out at her like even as she's dying. and like resisting like this comfort. Like, oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, to
It's
me,
so
it
good.
feels like another instance of one of those non sequitur feeling scenes turning into a really contextual scene
Yeah,
in a lot
that
of ways.
epiphany, yeah.
And I think Peele does a really great job using the reveal twist type of thing at the end to recontextualize so much in this movie.
Well, it recontextualizes the villains themselves, because even though they are the tethered are very creepy and unsettling and weird, like when you discover where they've come from, it makes sense, and like their rage and their desire to live normal lives on the world above, I think is extremely justified. Like, why do these people who look exactly like us, why do they get to live real, fulfilling lives while we're stuck underground psychically mimicking like what they're doing, but just an approximation. It's like there's no real like good guy or bad guy here, like
Yeah.
and that's why I like the line where she says we're Americans, because it's like, fuck yeah, we live underground, we're forgotten, and we live horrible existences, but like we're Americans too, like we're here as well. We have just as much right to all of the things that you do. And there's an excellent look at like what we're seeing in America in real life, where like some people have it really fucking good and a lot of people have it really fucking bad, and it's like we're just as entitled to things like healthcare and education and like a living wage and happiness. Like, we're just as entitled to all of those things as you are, so we're gonna fucking take them from you.
Well, yeah, and there's one scene in the basement classroom where Red mentions, you take your world for granted.
Right.
Your environment, the sky, all of that. And in a lot of ways, I definitely see that metaphor at play there. And even, we take our luxuries for granted. We take
Absolutely.
the luxuries of our modern technology without thinking about the sweatshops that they're created in,
100%.
the brutality that a lot of the things we take for granted are made through, which I thought was great. Even on a plot level, the "We Are Americans" line works really well for me, because that opening scene where she's watching the Hands Across America commercial, we slowly push into the TV. There's a couple of VHS tapes on the side. Like, one of them was Chud, which I thought was great, because that movie is all about cannibalistic humanoid
underground dwellers.
Yeah, which is
Chud.
Very fitting.
Going into that opening sequence with her watching the Hands Across America ad, something that it struck me like is fucking excellent was the audio during the ad. Like, the speaker says, like, makes this sort of like children's joke, like, like the whole like, what has 6 stripes and, like blue lips, like sort of thing. But in this case, it's like she's talking about the Hands Across America. So before it's revealed what the ad is, she says, what has thousands of eyes and teeth and hands? And it's like, oh my God, some sort of Lovecraftian beast does. That's terrifying.
It's like, and no, it's all of these people linking hands across America.
It's Hands Across
to
America.
Fight. What did Hands Across America fight? Hunger in America, I think. Poverty, starvation, something like that.
Yeah, relevant things.
Yeah, relevant things. Obviously Hands Across America was in the 80s.
I had a Hands Across America shirt
before
when
our
I was a
time
child too. That really hit me.
Well, that's one of the funny things is, and one of the things that is so good in this movie is that when she went missing or when she disappeared, like, the real Adelaide was wearing a Hands Across America shirt, and we see her watching that commercial.
Yeah, well,
so when it turns out that she's she ends up chained with the tethered down underground, we see that they've created like sort of an altar around this Hands Across America shirt, and we see that on the surface, after they've killed their doppelgangers, the tethered are doing Hands Across America. They're just standing and linking hands, and the last shot of the film we see is of them going through the mountains, this whole human chain of people. And because the real Adelaide was the mastermind behind their rebellion, and she disappeared in 86 when Hands Across America was the thing. So like that's that fixation of like all of these people joined together in unity in one big chain from sea to shining sea is like has been her obsession for all of these years, living in amongst the tethered.
The one thing I think is brilliant about how they reveal that she's watching the commercial is you don't see her face at all as it slowly moves in to the TV. And then right when the commercial ends, you get her reflection.
Right, because while the TV is dark.
TV,
yeah.
in a lot of ways, it feels like her shadow.
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of fucking excellent use of like mirror images and stuff.
Yeah. One of the big
Obviously.
things is the use of Jeremiah 11:11.
Yeah, we
movie.
see a bum on the boardwalk with that written on a sign, and 11:11, with the colon in the middle is a mirrored image. And yeah, go ahead and read Jeremiah 11:11.
Okay, so Jeremiah 11:11, just to bring a little context, is therefore, thus says the Lord, behold, I am bringing disaster upon them that they cannot escape. Though they cry to me, I will not listen to them. Some metal ass Old Testament.
And what
they're not being listened to like underground. It's so cool.
Well, yeah, that's the great thing is that it has multiple meanings in the context of the film, because if you look at it from the perspective of the tethered, they are imprisoned underground and they're crying out to God and he's not answering them. And so they take it upon themselves to do something about it. And then in the overworld, all of a sudden, all of these doppelgangers are coming up and like slaughtering people. And those people is a time of great disaster. And they're crying out to the Lord and they're not being answered. So it has different connotations depending on which side you're on, plus like the mirror image of the 11:11. It's fucking awesome. Like it's so fucking clever, honestly. Like Jordan Peele is such a good writer.
Yeah,
such a good writer.
There are several uses of 11:11. At one point, she puts her son to bed at 11:11.
Right.
And
that's right before the family shows up for the first time.
There's a sports game on one of the TVs at one point where the score is 11:11. The use of symmetry in this movie is really great. Even in the cinematography, they have a lot of shots where it's very symmetrical on both sides. Almost Wes Anderson-esque, but not trying to be quirky.
But with intention.
Yeah, exactly.
with narrative relevance.
Who'd have thought that'd be impactful?
Is my disdain for Wes Anderson showing?
I do love Wes Anderson. But like another thing I like about it too is like whenever what is it that everybody always says? It's 11:11, make a wish, and it's cool because like Make a Wish is also a charity foundation, which.
Yeah.
Is neat.
And also, like, in that context, the tethered are making a wish to live above ground, have real lives. I do love that, like, that it ends with that shot of, like, the Hands Across America chain going through the mountains. There's also, like, police and news helicopters flying over. So it's like, this is obviously a nationwide thing. We don't know the scale, like, what the rest of the world looks like. I do appreciate that ambiguity because also it doesn't really fucking matter.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it works super well as a metaphor.
Right.
But if you sweat the details too much, you're going to have a bit of a bad time.
What I'm super glad about, one of the things I think we should talk about, is that the existence of the tethered was a government experiment that failed. It was an experiment to control the people above ground using their doppelgangers below ground. Yeah. And I'm super glad that was just mentioned and then completely glossed over.
Yeah.
I started to get really worried
and
for a second.
It's great too because like they don't just like gloss it over, like not only for mechanical reasons because it's not something you want to get into the depths of. That's not why we're here. Also, it works like from a functional perspective because like it was clearly like a 1960s like era like
CIA experiment.
yeah, MK Ultra sort of situation,
an attempt to control the population.
Yeah, exactly. So like they used some sort of technology which we never get any of the remnants of, see any of, and I'm really to hard science fiction and love like those sorts of explanations, but here it was definitely not.
What I love too about it is early on in the movie they do a great misdirection with the daughter when they're in the car. And she mentions the government putting fluoride in your water
to control us.
And it's a great misdirection because everyone brushes it aside.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's not thought of much after that.
Yeah, I'm so glad they didn't go into detail on that because I think there's a lot that you can happily speculate on, and I'm super glad that we didn't get a fucking montage of like government scientists like creating clones.
No, we don't need
and
that.
How they control the doppelgangers. Like, I'm so fucking glad we didn't get that. It's the same kind of thing like in Get Out where there's this plot device of these people putting their brains into other bodies. There's like this sci-fi concept, but it's just a plot device to move the narrative forward, and they don't feel the need to get really heavily into the sci-fi mechanics of it. And it's in the same way, and I really appreciate that.
Right, because like the core of existentialism is why, not how.
Right.
And
I definitely started to roll my eyes in the theater when it's like, it was a government experiment that failed. I was like, oh no, please don't do this. And then they just brushed past it, and I was like, oh,
and it's
yes,
cool because
God.
like with the lore building too, like it must have happened like like several generations back in like in the 60s, and so like
and then
you get a really like pretty clear image of what happened. It's like they tried this thing to make these puppets to control people. It didn't work because they just kind of splits the souls. So they just abandoned them and left them and just kind of like put them under the rug, and they started to multiply instead of like die off.
Well, right, and because they're linked to the people above, they meet the same partners, they have the same children.
Yeah.
So there's like, as new people are born on the above world, a doppelganger is born naturally underground. And what I love is that it's self-sustaining because we see in a flashback underground that what they eat is they just eat the rabbits. They just have all of these rabbits that they're literally just tearing apart live and eating raw whenever anybody above ground their doppelgangers above ground are eating. And it's self-sustaining because rabbits breed like rabbits.
Yeah.
Like that. So their food source has been like multiplying all of these years, and they keep multiplying, and it's completely self-sustaining.
And the way they show the mirror in the underground is so great, where they have the flashback of the past and everyone's doing the same motions as above ground.
Yeah, but
and
just like in the hallway.
And you get like people on roller coaster rides or the spinning rides, and they're just doing it in a room without any context.
Yeah.
Which I thought recontextualized worked so well.
Great. It was it was funny, but like in like a really unsettling way.
Yes, and that is the biggest point that I wanted to bring to this, and that's the horror, to use a word I overuse, mechanism. Yeah, this is my favorite aspect of this film, is the horror aesthetic is pulled almost entirely from Butoh. Like, clearly Jordan Peele was very aware of like that style of dance, and it's all over this film. Like, any sort of element of horror is pulling from like the Butoh like camp. So if you're unfamiliar with Butoh, it's a style of dance that was born out of Japan after the atomic bomb. Feel free to go to the Wikipedia article, read more about it, or get into it. I highly recommend it. If you enjoyed like the style of horror in Us, like you'll get something out of like seeing this style of dance. It's reflective of like that internal existentialism and anxiety. It's been a good while since I've gotten into it, but the gist of it is it's a way to express these horrible feelings, these pent up emotions that you like we have societally. And very often Butoh, like it's the bottom of the uncanny valley. It's these figures like just trying to walk downstairs, or they imitate social gatherings. That's one of my favorite ones, and one of the ones that I think like the film reminded me of the most is there's a Butoh like dance where it's a bunch of people and they're all like imitating a social gathering, but they all have these like expressions of like total fear and anxiety, and they're sort of like croaking and making these like strange like body horror sort of esque gestures. Very often in Budo, like the dancer is like not wearing very much. It's usually just like a loincloth, and they're covered in like a white powder, and they just move like really disjointed and horribly. And but yeah, it's usually like a means of social commentary, and it's cool because like Jordan Peele uses these horror figures in a similar way, like as a means of social commentary, and you see them doing the same thing, like imitating like day-to-day activities in these horror scenarios.
Well, it's cool because imitation is all they know. They like their entire existence is imitating copies of themselves in the real world, but they're doing it in this very plain, sterile, beige environment.
Almost
unconsciously.
You know?
Yeah, well, it's extremely unconsciously. They don't speak to each other. They don't know how to speak. Their existence is relegated entirely to imitation. So when we see them, in the real world killing people and like what they're doing, it's all like a really bad imitation of how people are supposed to behave and supposed to move, but they don't understand it really, which I think is great, and it makes for really fucking creepy stuff, like especially in the home invasion part at the beginning, when we see how Red gives commands to her family with just like these like weird finger and hand gestures and these like clicking noises and shit like that, and they know exactly what that stuff means. It's very unsettling in the best way.
Yeah, well, I love the way they do that. It reminds me of like the allegory of the cave or something like that, where they only get representations of reality rather than the actual thing, and that kind of affects the context of how they approach stuff like that, which I thought was really well done. You even get a scene where the doppelganger of the husband, who had just bought a little boat, and the engine keeps going out.
Oh, what was the name of the boat? It was
Crawdaddy.
The Crawdaddy.
Yeah. So he has to just hit the engine to get it restarted.
Yeah, because it leans to the left.
The doppelganger of him understands the motions, but you don't really get the same context. So he's just like slapping the engine as hard as he can, which I thought was great.
It's really fun how each of the doppelgangers like have their own sort of sound that they make. Like, some of them kind of click, some of them sort of do the and some of them like the dad one, for instance, makes that Lord like noise like occasionally.
Yeah.
And I was saying on the car ride back that I can't wait to hear like all like the Death Grips remixes with the dad's voice.
Yeah,
like it's gonna be really
yeah. I wasn't even thinking about that, but you're absolutely right. It's inevitable. It's bound to happen.
Going back to the dance stuff for just a second.
Sure.
This
There's
movie,
so much to talk about.
directly uses dance in some interesting ways. Adelaide was a dancer.
Well, she was, her parents put her into dance as a means to overcome her quote-unquote PTSD when she wasn't talking. And we get that scene in Underground where Red is, telling all this stuff to Adelaide, and she says, "I never would have learned to dance if not for you." That is true, that if the real Adelaide, hadn't been trapped underground, then the fake Adelaide would not have been traumatized, quote unquote, would not have been put into dance, and then the real Adelaide, having to mimic her underground, would also not have danced. And what I love about that so much is after that, when they fight,
you get an awesome payoff because it's very choreographed.
Well, because a
lot of ways beautiful.
It's extremely beautiful. Well, the thing is like our Adelaide has not danced in such a long time, and she's just enraged, and she's just going after Red with the fire poker and just like trying to use brute force, and Red is just like dancing around her. So it's only when Adelaide kind of like steps into that and makes it a dance between the two of them that she finally like deals the death blow.
It makes so much sense too, because like you see like her move incredibly fast, like especially compared to the other doppelgangers, and it separates her in this really cool and terrifying way. Like seeing like the other one's kind of like brooding around like in like kind of like ogre like motions where she's just like fucking pristine and perfect, and she just like everything she does is like so like her posture is ace, and like her like those like 90-degree head turns really cool. And to get that like that justification for it later on, and to see that was all like tightly written world building was neat. But also that same, to kind of elaborate on your point a little bit, like seeing how like all of the other tethered or like sort of forced, to mirror these movements like puppets on strings, but because Adelaide has this connection to dance, she's able to sort of take that as choreography and spend this like years and years just taking these impulses and using them as an opportunity to just hone her skills as this perfect dancer. And I fucking love that. I just love it to bits. It's so cool. It's such a cool character trait.
And that whole fight sequence is set to this like really dark string version of I Got Five on It.
We should talk a little bit more about the use of music in this movie.
Yeah, sure.
How perfect it is.
It uses a collection of, I guess you could say, pop songbook songs in amazing ways. I've Got Five on It is really the centerpiece of it. They use it early in the movie, kind of offhandedly, when they play it in the car, and they kind of sing along to it.
Yeah.
And snap on the on beats, which is weird. They don't like snap on the off beats like you should, but but that song comes up over and over again in motifs in the score, which is really awesome. Culminating in that scene where you get that super awesome string version, but you also get dope music used in some of the funniest ways. For
definitely.
example, in The Yuppie House with Tim Heidecker and Elizabeth Moss. Elizabeth Moss notices the generator kicks in and something's up, and Tim Heidecker just doesn't want to do anything, and he plays a good vibrations.
Yeah. Well, what I liked too, a slight offshoot, is that they have an off-brand Alexa called Ophelia.
And later on in the scene where they're getting attacked by their doppelgangers, Elizabeth Moss tries to use Ophelia to call the police, and it blasts fucks the police, which is honestly one of the funniest sequences in the movie.
Well, right, because after that, the main character, the family, the Wilsons, come in, and like we get that scene where like it's just the kids like going through the house because the dad's out back fighting the evil Tim Heidecker, and Lupita has been taken by the Elizabeth Moss doppelganger, and so it's just like the kids who come in, and they're just like looking around the house, and there's just like blood everywhere, and they know that there's like the twin girl doppelganger somewhere, and the whole time it's just blasting "Fuck the police." It's awesome. It's so funny.
It does a good job recontextualizing some of the lines in "Fuck the Police" too, because the song is all about killing cops and stuff,
right?
And some of the lines about bloody messes get a little more sinister when they're used in this context, which I thought was awesome.
This movie was a lot more like openly humorous than I was expecting. Get Out had a lot of that as well, but I think this movie is probably, I would say it's a bit funnier than Get Out.
I think Get Out overall is probably a lighter film.
I would kind of agree, actually. I think this movie has moments of black comedy.
I think whether it's overall darker or not, I think this movie has more instances of pure laugh out loud comedic moments than Get Out does.
Like Get Out has a lot of especially when you don't have the context of the horror, for such a large portion of the film in Get Out, those moments of uncertainty are kind of comedic. Whereas in this film, the moments of uncertainty are straight up terrifying. Us does, I think, rely more on
I think it has more
beat jokes.
Yeah.
They're just meant to land, and usually are just said by someone in the family, like the dad or whatever. Whereas Get Out, you're kind of laughing nervously, during those.
I think Get Out a lot more is based on the TSA agent in a lot of ways.
Well, the straight up comedic.
It's relegated to that a lot. Where this one, it's much more situational a lot of times.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really funny moments in this. There's a lot of like straight up jokes, which I think is good. And Jordan Peele strikes a really fucking great balance between things being funny and also horrifying. I think a great example is like the Tim Heidecker doppelganger, because I mean, obviously, it's Tim Heidecker. He's hamming it up, and it's legitimately funny, but it goes from being funny to terrifying like in a split second, just because of like the absurdity of it is funny, but also like
it gets to a point where it almost hits uncanny valley.
It's a clear and present danger. Well, yeah, uncanny valley is great because the tethered look like people and they kind of behave like people, but not really. I think it hits that same level of unnerving that the uncanny valley does. Is that it's almost a perfect copy, but the little ways in which it's different are noticeable enough to be deeply unsettling.
Yeah, I give a lot of credit to the acting in this movie.
Yeah, dude, that's another thing I wanted to mention is that holy shit, what a great example of fucking just like stellar acting, because all of the characters have to play two parts. They have to be normal people and they have to be shadow people, and being able to balance both of those is fucking awesome.
In particular, Lupita does such a great job with even minor tics and expressions for both of her characters. Reveal so much without saying a single thing.
Well, that's the thing, is that like Adelaide has a lot of moments where she exhibits the tics of the tethered, especially when she's killing Red at the end, which is why I think that
she clicks her teeth.
Yeah, which is why I think that her son, who sees all of that, that's why when they look at each other at the end and she does that kind of like fake wide-eyed grin, that I think he realizes that she is one of the doppelgangers, because he sees her behave that way. And even though she's existed in the real world for over half her life at that point, those tics and things are still a part of her, and she's covered them up, but they're still there subconsciously.
One minor thing I want to talk about Red with is I want to get your guys' opinion a little bit, and this question is less about how, because the script is great, but how much.
Okay.
I think almost all of the dialogue Red has, or at least the overwhelming majority of the dialogue she has, is
expository
exposition.
Yeah.
Do you think it's too much?
I was thinking about that, especially in the classroom scene towards the end. It feels very much like a villain's monologue, but at the same time she frames it as sort of a fairy tale, like the first time she speaks in the home invasion scene when she gives
was a shadow.
Well, she starts with once upon a time.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So she frames it as like a bedtime story, as a fairy tale, and then there's a long chunk between, and then at the end in the classroom she kind of finishes it. And I did kind of think it might have been too much, but at the same time, I don't know what it would have been like without it, because I think it reveals things that we don't get otherwise that I think are kind of necessary.
Yeah, well, again, it's less about the how, because Jordan Peele is a great writer.
Yeah.
And more how much. I think
maybe a little bit too much.
It borders on over-explanation a little bit with her character, but the writing itself is very good. So.
There was only one thing. Oh, well, so first off, during the first monologue at the opener. Also, first off, I love that when it comes to the home invasion arc, of the plot, they really do a good job of cutting to the chase. Like, they have the whole family sitting down in front of them with them mirrored across, much like the scene in Strangers, the final scene in Strangers.
Yeah.
And they just cut to that moment, what are we, like at that point, maybe 30 minutes into the film?
Yeah,
and
probably.
you get to that same question with the family on the couch being like, what are you doing? Why are you here? And in the Strangers, it's, like, because you were home. Ooh.
Yeah.
And then here it's a much longer, like, monologue. And but during that monologue, I was a little unsure. I was like, where is this going? We're America. I'm not sure how I feel about this, like, because we didn't have the context at that time.
I think
I was really spooked out. Like, it's very creepy, but also it's like, I'm a little concerned. I don't know where this is going. It might be too heavy-handed, and it wasn't. And I was very happy with that. But my one concern, I will say, and it's honestly, it's the one, like, kind of iffy thing I have about this film, and it's not even, it's a very, very, very minor thing. But during her closing monologue, her only real explanation for the Hands Across America thing and, like, the movement and, like, coordinating this mass, almost like rebellion, is to make a statement. I needed to make a statement. And, like, that's really the only explanation we get for, like, the specificity of, like, how they rise up. I wanted maybe, like, something a little more personal or a little bit more reason. Like she clearly has those things, but I don't know, that was kind of weird just to be like, oh, we're doing this very specific, very weird thing just to make a statement.
Oh, well, I'm glad that they didn't give more, honestly.
No, I think it was fine because we see one of the last things she experienced before she was taken underground, was the Hands Across America thing. She saw the ad for it. She had the shirt. She was a child. It was something that was very big that was happening at that time. It was a big deal. So to be fixated on that and to, like, have the reminder of, like, the Hands Across America shirt that she's wearing, then growing up thinking that, the people above were unified in that way, but, they, down here we are not, we're just imitations. And then as they rise to the surface, to have that poignant moment, even though in fucking 2019, nobody's thinking about Hands Across America, but, like, down there, sure, that's like the only relic from the
surface.
the surface world that they have down there is the Hands Across America t-shirt. So we see it has become a shrine for them. They've turned it into a shrine. So it makes sense that is, when they rise and claim the surface, that is
I can take all that.
That is a symbol that they've been fixated on for so many years that they turn it into a reality.
And they realized Red is different because she has experience living above.
Exactly. That's why she's their, like, messiah figure. A touch that I really like is when they go to the beach at the beginning, in present day, as they're pulling up, we see the bum with the Jeremiah 11:11 sign. He's being, like, wheeled into an ambulance, and he's, like, all bloody and covered in stab wounds. And then when the kid wanders off, he sees this strange man with, like, blood dripping from his hand standing with his arms out on the beach. And we see him later in the chain, in the same spot. So he just happened to come to the surface before everybody else, and he took his place in the chain and just stood there waiting until all the rest came up and joined him. I thought that was a really nice touch.
Yeah, I thought that was really clever.
Another cool thing about the Hands Across America, like, symbol is when we were first leaving the theater, I had a concern, and I wasn't sure about, were all the replicants, all the doppelgangers, were they wearing the same clothes? And I thought it was kind of strange. It was like, up until then you can think it's like, oh, it's some sort of, like, biological experiment. But, like, if they're all wearing the same clothes, it had to have been, like, some sort of, like the technology would have to be very different for, like, whatever world building thing that we don't learn about is. And then Ben noted something that I had missed that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, well, early on, at the beginning of the movie, the original Adelaide, her dad wins her a Thriller shirt. It's very
in a carnival
80s
game,
camp. In the underground, Red is wearing a shirt that has kind of
it's an approximation
of it. It's very abstract, but has the same kind of design. And they give it to her because, above ground, the same thing was happening. This is one of those details where I think if you think about it too much,
you'll break it.
You'll break it
for sure.
But
for sure.
I think, well, there could still be some, like, hard science reason for it, or soft science, like
Well, they're-
sci-fi, like, oh, it's a dimension laser or some shit.
I just
Like,
they're-
there's
they're
no
I
reason.
creating-
don't think it needs it.
No,
No.
it definitely doesn't. I'm just saying that, like, it could be explained.
It's everything in the underground world is an approximation, but not an exact.
Yeah.
That's why the experiment is a failure to control the people, because the best they can do is create an approximation.
I think it's
not
one of
an
those.
exact.
I did really
things
like
where-
that. Like the shirts are like they're similar, but there's still something wrong with them. Like even down to their clothes. And I ended up like really liking that idea. But what's cool about that is because they're sort of like they're mirrored patterns on the shirts. The Hands Across America like symbol would still be like
It's the same.
the same.
Yeah.
And of course it is the same shirt, so it's the one shirt that isn't mirrored, which is also neat. You know, has a bit
And
abstractified.
it's one of those things where sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer.
Yeah.
The clothes are similar because it's a mirror world, and it's kind of that allegory of the cave. You know, approximations of reality. You're getting the shadow puppets.
Right, you're
of-
seeing the shadow from outside, but you're not seeing the real thing.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on a second, you made the comparison to the strangers in the home invasion scene, which I think is super apt.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of comparisons to that, especially in the horror elements of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have the kid with the mask, which is very evocative of the strangers. When they sit down and explain, it's very funny games too, in the explanation, because it's so direct in them explaining exactly why they're doing
Right.
it.
Yeah, to have like a sit down with like the monster, you know, like the invaders is such a cool moment, you know, because it has this like this artificial sense of like a very like peaceful moment, like sitting down and like having a dialogue and having a compromise.
Well, and sitting
it's-
down with yourself too.
Yeah.
But like a horrifying approximation of yourself.
Exactly.
You know, it's very much that idea of the doppelganger being everything that you don't want to admit about yourself, the faults that you don't want to don't want to recognize in yourself. You know, they manifest in your shadow. I think that's the perfect way to do that, is to have the doppelganger family invade the house, but then like immediately to sit down and be confronted by them plainly. It's great that happens so early on rather than at the end, where you'd think that, very much like in The Strangers, like they go through all of this, like all of the horror stuff, and then at the end they sit, you know, they're confronted with the villains in a sit down situation. To have it be like one of the first like things that happens once the family shows up, awesome. Loved it.
I did see in the IMDb trivia that Jordan Peele had a collection of like 10 movies that he showed the entire cast to try to get them into
Cool.
the
Nice.
feel.
Love
Some of them were like The Shining, which I think is very apt in kind of the atmosphere of the horror of
Yeah,
this
totally.
movie.
Oh yeah, like just the opening
know?
credits were very Kubrick reminiscent, I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the idea of that sense of dread over just plain jump scares. Though there are a few in this movie, I
Yeah,
think
more
they're
than I
well
expected.
done.
And the perversion of like beautiful scenes and like horrifying things happen in them. That's a very Kubrick thing to do, and something that Jordan Peele has said in interviews that is a big inspiration for his style of horror. He takes that from Kubrick. So that makes sense. What are some of the others?
Another one was Martyrs, which I see
Interesting.
the connection.
Yeah, I can see that
with.
too.
Funny Games was also one of them,
Obviously.
understandably.
Yeah, any of the jump scares in this film, like I'm normally not very partial to jump scares, but they were all pretty clever. Like
I think they
you know,
were.
whenever-
I think they were motivated for the most part. Yeah.
they never felt superfluous. You
Yeah.
know, they always felt like contextual. and
But the
fun.
other ones on the list were The Babadook,
nice.
Okay.
It Follows,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense.
I get that.
Tale of Two Sisters, which I haven't seen. The Birds.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know, there's
know
a
if I
shot
would've
with the
thought of that one.
seagulls that
Yeah.
I on the beach that I was like, oh, very birds. Like, yeah, his building of tension, like leading up to the apocalyptic event. I did really feel like
It's
there were
pretty
some similarities
Hitchcockian,
between
yeah.
like the birds, like Hitchcock's The Birds.
Yeah, well,
That
and
rising tension was
yeah,
great.
even on a more abstract scale of the sense of tension throughout this movie and the imposing threat,
Yeah.
just surrounding everywhere they look.
Also, there's the sequence in The Birds with the gas tank and the cigarette with the fire. You know, when everyone
Yeah,
else is held up
that's true.
inside and they're like screaming at the guy. And we have that moment with like the family in the car and the kid with the gas. And I can definitely see The Birds. I can definitely see
Yeah,
that. That's
but
neat. That's
the
neat.
three others were Dead Again, came out in '91. I haven't
that
seen
one.
it. Let the Right One In.
Yeah.
And
makes sense.
The Sixth Sense.
Interesting.
Spooky Kids.
Maybe use of twist.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know. Yeah, most of those make sense. There are a couple I haven't seen, and there are a couple that I'm not super sure about. Mostly The Sixth Sense, but interesting. That's cool. I always love when directors will begin their production with like making their cast and crew like watch certain films or read certain books. It's like this is, we're trying to capture a certain ethos here. Like we're all going to be on the same page if we
Building
all know
a collective
if we all know the
language.
material that we're working from. I like that a lot. I think it makes for really good filmmaking is to, exactly like you said, building a collective language among your cast and crew. Shit, I think we've pretty well unpacked this movie. Do y'all just want to go ahead and rate it?
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Ben, why don't you start and we'll work down.
Okay. So Jordan Peele does an amazing job with Us. A movie that is dark, is very funny, is a lot to think about. The use of metaphor in it, the double meaning of us and US in the title even says a lot about what's within the movie. The movie is so cleverly written. They tie everything in, even, the minor things that seem like non sequiturs at first get a payoff by the end. The acting is amazing. Some of the minor details of the acting just work so well to emphasize everything. I was blown away, honestly, by this movie. I honestly think I prefer it a little bit to Get Out, which, I only time will tell. I'll see how I feel on rewatches, but I'm feeling very good about this movie, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5.
All right.
Yeah, all I have to say is just ditto everything I've already said. Like it's a masterpiece. I loved it to bits, and I think that Get Out is pretty well a perfect film as well. Yeah, how many pods am I going to give this movie? I've got 5 on it.
Yeah, man, I thought this movie was incredible as well. I think that there's so much more than just the surface level. I walked out of it, not knowing how I felt about certain things. It was nice to have a night to sleep on it, and to just sort of unpack things on my own. I can't say whether I liked it more or less than Get Out at this point, because I think Get Out is a pretty perfect film, and my appreciation for Get Out has only grown on subsequent viewings. I feel like it's probably going to be the same with this one. Having only seen it one time, I can't definitively rank it yet out of his 2 films that he's done so far. But like, holy fuck, Jordan Peele is more so than ever, somebody to keep an eye on. Like, I think he's a fucking master. I'm more excited for his Candyman remake than ever.
Yes.
I think he's gonna fucking rock it. I didn't expect him to let me down with this movie, and he sure did not. It's gonna be a 5 for me as well, dog. That's a unanimous 5 out of 5 for us across the board.
Golden Pod.
And it joins the hallowed halls of the Golden Pod. That's two of those back to back. The Witch last week, and now us. 2 new Golden Pods
We
back
eatin',
to back.
fam.
We fucking eaten. Yeah, so perfect. I'm hoping that if you've listened to this whole episode that you have also seen the film. If for some reason you haven't, sorry we fucking spoiled it for you. We warned you. See
Still
it.
well worth the watch.
But if
Like,
you're one of
definitely
those
see
people
it,
that
see
don't
it.
care about spoilers, I think
Absolutely,
some of the
go see
ideas
it.
we talked about will help unpack some of that.
Give some context, absolutely.
As well, so.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen it and you didn't heed our warning at the beginning, still fucking go see it.
It's worth it. See
absolutely
it in the
worth it.
theaters.
See it in the theaters if you have the chance.
You'll get a reactive audience, but sometimes, especially in movies like this, I think it makes it
if
a
you've
unique
got
thing and something that's worth seeking out.
if you've
There
got
are
a
lot of,
good
like,
if you've got a
universal
good
like,
audience,
for you know the as much of like the guy behind us was a dipshit. Like we did.
It was mostly just him. Everybody else in the theater was
like
fine.
you get these great like universal gasps and such. Like seeing like a truly like scary film like in a theater can be really fun. Like getting the crowd reactions and just like everyone like a whole like mass of people watching this movie all scared is great.
Yeah, no,
like,
other than the dipshits behind us who kept talking and the one guy who fucking kept going see ya
making jokes to hide his insecurities
right
and fear,
other than that, like our crowd was pretty good, so it was overall a pretty decent theater experience. It's definitely a good film to see on the big screen. So definitely go see it. I'm sure it's going to be in theaters for a minute.
Yes.
I'm sure it's going to be in theaters.
I think it
for
had
a minute.
one of the wider horror releases of all time.
We're recording this the day after its release. And also, may I say that having a non-franchise horror film be an event, excellent. Awesome. So good. It's what the culture of horror films needs. We need to fucking have events for new horror films that are not fucking reboots of old franchises. As much as I loved the Halloween reboot, we need to start having events for good horror films that are truly and wholly fresh and original. Good for fucking Jordan
I think
Peele.
it comes down to us just needing more mainstream, well-written horror movies.
Sure.
Like,
but I think there are plenty of great ones out there, in recent years that we've talked about with like The Babadook and It Follows. And
sure,
The Witch.
but mainstream.
But those are all small indie horror films that get limited releases, and for us was a huge release.
No one's going into The Curse of La Llorona for writing quality.
Right, exactly. And we obviously can't we can't talk about the opening weekend box office yet because when we're recording this, it is still opening weekend, but on Thursday night when it was released, it did gross $7.5 million on that one night, and it's looking like it's predicted to do 40 to 50 million opening weekend. So
which is quite good.
Which is great.
We did predict the Rotten Tomatoes score.
Yeah, we talked about preliminary ratings last episode. Last time it was sitting at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, TCU predicted 90.
Yep.
Cleveland, you predicted 85, and I predicted 86. I think currently we're sitting at 95.
So yeah, it's gone down a little bit, as is to be expected.
You always got your contrarians.
Sure. But yeah, we'll do a final update on that on the next episode.
Just for early opportunity here, TCU predicted 75 million opening weekend.
Okay.
Cleveland, you predicted 30, and I predicted 63. So,
all right,
we'll see how it turns out. I could see it going very high. I hope considering it does. How much of an event it was.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I hope it does fucking gangbusters. But yeah, I want to briefly take us into the Metacritic corner.
What time is it?
Metacritic corner.
What time is it?
Metacritic corner. Yeah, so I've got oh boy, man. I've got two for us this week. Holy shit. I checked Metacritic last night after we got out of the movie, and these were not there yet. So these are fresh, hot, new reviews.
Ooh, man, steaming hot.
That have come in between the time we saw the movie last night and when we're recording this morning. Holy shit, boys. Holy shit.
Me. Lay it down.
Okay, this first one is from Metacritic user Red Truther.
Oh, boy. Oh, the name
y'all,
like that.
Y'all already know.
Oh. Oh dear.
So here we are again in the same scenario. Jordan Peele spits out a mediocre trope-filled film chock full of biased race-baiting agendas, and the leftist critics of Hollywood eat it up like a buttery megatub of popcorn. We have reached such a low in terms of what's hailed in critical acclaim these days when it has to fit this same old formula of supposed politically correct themes of the left. Objectivity and logic are thrown out the window in an effort to overcompensate based on these particular agendas. The carbon copy deluded critics give their rave reviews of cliche genre formulaic bore fests like Get Out and Us in fear of ridicule if they go against the grain with a truthful review. That's where we are now.
Oh God.
Don't listen to the critics or all the hype created by social trending media. This film is a blend of The Strangers and Body Snatchers and has nothing original in it, and it is the epitome of mediocrity. 0 out of 10.
Yeah, that's a big yikes for me, dog.
Big yikes. Big old yikes.
Yeah, that's gonna be a no.
It's in all caps. Yikes.
Holy shit, though.
Formulaic is a very hot take.
Literally
The hottest take.
the
Too hot
only
to touch, honestly.
literally the only thing I agree with that this person said is that the film is a blend of The Strangers and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Yep, that's it.
Great blend.
Like,
But
it's a good
very
blend.
loose blend.
And
at
also
the same
lots of
time.
other things. And also, like, did you guys get the feeling that this film was pushing an agenda?
No, it
No.
did the opposite.
Like,
I found this film much less political than Get Out, and
Yeah.
and Get Out wasn't even pushing an agenda. It's just making a statement, and to say that like critics are scared to ridicule or to tell the truth about movies like this because they'll be ridiculed for not going along with politically correct leftist movies. Did that seem politically correct to you guys? Did Get Out seem politically correct to you guys? They're films by a black filmmaker
there was a
starring
sequence with
black
children like
yeah,
killing
like-
other doppelganger children while "Fuck the Police" was playing. Like, fuck him.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Whatever.
No,
Honestly,
How is that politically correct? Like,
this
whatever.
this person is 100% a MAGA chud who gets his blood pressure worked up when he sees black people in leading roles.
Yeah.
And thinks that it's like affirmative action and
race baiting.
and race baiting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What the main characters were the main actors were black. Is that what was race baiting about this movie?
yeah, libtard.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Like, what the fuck?
What?
Oh my god. Well, and the funniest part was he emphasizes that this is a ripoff of The Strangers, but The Strangers itself is a remake of another movie before it.
Right.
So it's technically a ripoff of a
ripoff.
ripoff.
Yeah,
like-
well, I guarantee he does not know about the existence of them. There's no way he's ever heard of that movie. So The Strangers is probably a wholly original concept to him. So I'm gonna give that review a 0 out of 5.
Big old yikes out.
Yeah.
Bad times all around. This next one is not quite as aggressive, but I do think that it's still pretty wrong. This is from Metacritic user Lambo442. The director sacrifices entertainment value to make some big statement about American society, which you could just as easily learn from reading a history book about American society. By the end of the film, everything just gets so pretentious and ridiculous, you're shaking your head in disbelief. Then, seeing as you're so dumbfounded as to what just happened, you have to go online to read about it, and then end up shaking your head even more. And don't tell me for a second anyone giving this film a great review understood what was going on symbolically while they watched it. I don't know, guys. I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. underneath this political garbage, there's actually quite an intense horror, which is such a shame, because if Peele just concentrated on making an entertaining, believable, and coherent film instead of ramming his political agenda down our throats, we'd walk away more entertained. Another thing that let it down was the script. Why are this family making jokes while they're being stalked? Why are this family making jokes whilst they're being stalked and treating it all so lightheartedly? It just makes the mood so jarring. Everything was great with this film until you start having things explained, and then it just gets farcical. Absolute nonsense. 2 out of 10.
The thing that baffles me about this one is you can easily ignore the metaphor in this movie and all of that stuff and still really enjoy the horror itself. Like,
exactly.
It's still, at its core, a really well-made horror movie.
It's just a fucking horror film.
That's scary.
Like a hokey horror premise, you know? Crazy government, you know?
This is yet another...
experiment.
It's so baffling to me because this is yet another person who thinks that there's a political agenda behind this film. Like, I think you can definitely look at certain things and themes in the film from a political standpoint as commentary, but this film is not like trying to shove an agenda down your throat. It doesn't so much less than Get Out, like as we've talked about. I think that this person, while not as like outwardly inflammatory as Red Truther from the last review, I feel like that this person has the same mindset where they see a predominantly African-American cast and they think, oh, that's a political agenda just because white people aren't the lead? Is that it? Is that what makes this film so political to people?
It's that worldview where everything has to be political.
Right.
And you see it, I hate to pull this card, but you see it on both sides sometimes, you know, like you see it in comedy even where every comedian has to make a great point, or like every film or every piece of art is political. And it's like, sure, if you want to look into that stuff, you can find it, but don't just bring that every time.
Right.
It's exhausting.
Exactly.
You know? Like, just enjoy stuff sometimes, you know? Like,
this film totally lets you do that.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that just because of that Get Out was thematically very much about like the Black experience in America, that these people are always going to exist where they go into every Jordan Peele film thinking that there is a leftist, racially biased political agenda in everything that he does, and that all of his work is trying to shove that down our throats. And like Jordan Peele even said in the NPR interview that I read, like I talked about earlier, he said, "Us is not about race." And it's not. You can look at it from a racial perspective, but it's not about race, and there's not a fucking agenda that's being shoved down our throat.
Right, you can use the film as a sounding board for racial discussion.
It's about
you can absolutely like do that, but the film can also be used as a sounding board for plenty of other things.
It's about the idea of us versus them, but the us and the them are never clearly defined. He even says that is like the us can be any idea of us. The idea of us is just that there is a them on the other side, you know? So you can look at that in literally any way you want. It's not like there's one right side and one wrong side. You know, oh my God, these people are they have brain worms. Oh, okay. That's the end of Metacritic Corner. I'm done with it. I'm done. Yeah, that'll bring us to the end of this episode. It's a long one, but I think we had a lot of good shit to talk about. Ben, what is on the schedule for next week?
Next week, we are covering one of my favorite horror movies of the 2000s, Bug, by William Friedkin.
This was your pick, right?
Yes.
I have not seen Bug.
It is very unique, and I am very excited to talk about it because I think there's a lot to unpack.
All right. Well, cool. I know nothing about that movie, so I don't know what to expect. It's gonna be totally fresh from me. What about you, Cleve? You too?
Bug?
Yeah.
I don't know nothing about
Bug!
I know zero.
Cool. So yeah, we're gonna be getting some fresh perspectives on that next week. Yeah, if you like the show, do the thing. Leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Hit those 5 stars. Leave us a nice little blurb or something. Tell us what you like about the show. Share the show with your friends. If you went to go see us with one of your friends, listen to this episode with one of your friends. I don't know. Spread the word. We talk about movies here.
And speaking of spreading things, our sponsor would like you to know that you should spread their content all over the place and buy it. Our sponsor this week is Dr. Doppel's Ganger Be Gone. And it's a spray that will get rid of all those doppelgangers, but don't use it until after you've seen us, because you don't want that to be gone. But then afterwards, like, oh, they're a problem, and you gotta get rid of those doppelgangers. So make that doppelganger a doppelgoner with Dr. Doppel's Ganger Be Gone.
Thank you. I forgot the copy that Dr. Doppel sent to us, Cleveland, so I'm glad you remembered to do that so we can get our money.
Oh, yeah, I had to hop on that Doppel.
So leave the rating and review and stuff like that. Follow us on Twitter. We're still in the midst of our March Madness horror bracket. I imagine by the time this episode comes out, there will be different results.
Yes, it's probably final 8 or final 4.
Yeah. So if you haven't been doing that and you want to vote, follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod. We have polls up there pitting great horror films against each other. Only one will come out on top. Yeah.
Only one will be victorious.
Y'all have done some fucking, even at the time that we're recording this, y'all have done some wild fucking things so far.
Yep.
The goddamn Shaun of the Dead just beat out The Thing.
What?
And I like Shaun of the Dead,
They're
but
both
like,
really good movies, but The Thing, man.
yeah, seriously. So y'all be wildin'.
But keep voting. Keep
Yeah, no, bring it on.
Yeah,
I'm
keep
very
surprising us.
I'm very curious to see what the winner is going to be. So we'll see pretty soon. Follow us on Letterboxd as well for a list of all the films we've talked about on the show, our average ratings, links to the episodes that correspond with those films. Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome for stuff.
And I'm at Mr. Sheets to get more of my very spicy takes.
And I'm Cleveland Mosier, or Iron Prism on ArtStation. Yeah, Cleveland Mosier on ArtStation will get you there. And I also am regularly tweeting for Light Arc Studio, the company account that we're working on. It Stares Back. It's happened. Ooh, we're doing more alpha testing right now, and it's looking great.
Yeah, like right after this, we're getting to do our next round of that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the demo, or the prologue is coming soon, so stay tuned. If you like horror and you like vidget games and you like horror vidget games,
we got you.
We got the horror in the vidget games. All right, well, thanks for listening. We appreciate you and love you as always. Until next time, we all got 5 on it, so we better go get us a fucking bag.